Welcome to Insights. I'm Dick Goldberg, and today we're talking with two clergy who minister in jails and prisons. How are the issues similar or different than their parishioners at their churches? What are inmates seeking spiritually? What life lessons can these two people share with us from their experiences in jails and prisons? With us today, the Reverend Jerry Hancock. He is a former lawyer who spent 20 years in the justice system as a defense attorney, and he also was an assistant district attorney before embarking on a career in ministry. He is now director of prison ministry at the First Congregational Church in Madison, Wisconsin, and that covers over 300 visits a year to inmates in prison behind the walls. Also with us is the man who ministers to the Dane County Jail inmates, John Mix, who served Lutheran congregations as a minister for 10 years from 1975 to 85, then a 20-year art career followed that, then art therapy, then he began volunteering to see people in jail, and then since 2006, this has been his career. He is the minister to the prisoners at the Dane County Jail. And gentlemen, thanks very much for being with us.
Glad to be here.
Now,
Thank you, Dick.
We are in Madison, Wisconsin today, and I'm wondering how many prisoners right now are in the Dane County Jail in a town of 300,000 people. Any idea?
Yeah, the typical population at the jail is about 900.
900 people.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people in this small community.
Yeah, most people are pretty surprised that there's that many in our county jail.
And you work mainly with prisons, Jerry.
That's right.
You know, I'm wondering, and you go to several facilities.
About a dozen.
A dozen prisons?
Yeah, in
Okay.
state prisons in Wisconsin.
Okay. Now, I asked you both here on the premise that there's something different in your work. I don't know if the two of you have shared notes, but is there differences in counseling to people in jail, which is where people are for 1 year or less, right?
Typically, the majority are there.
For lesser offenses than prison. Prison is...
Well, the offense can be just as severe, but the jail is where you start.
Okay, so you've got some people starting there and some people who are serving their term
if
there.
you're arrested, for drunk driving or any offense, you go to jail.
Right, or murder at
that's
first,
right.
until you're tried.
Yeah.
So is there a difference, or is it...
Right. Dick, I think John, by describing the function of the jail, really describes one of the major differences, which is, in some ways, his ministry is short-term, and my ministry is long-term.
Mm.
I see men and women in prison that may be there for the rest of their lives. And so that presents very different challenges in terms of ministry and the kind of pastoral care that we can provide.
What's the difference? What kind of pastoral care is different for a person who's got a 20-year term left and someone's got a year?
Well, let me speak to the long-term issues. One of the real concerns is how do you provide hope for someone who's in prison, and in Wisconsin and many other states, since the get tough on crime mentality, we have no longer any parole or any time off for good behavior. So in Wisconsin, as in many other states, you're going to do every single day of the sentence that the judge imposes. There's nothing you can do inside the walls that will shorten your sentence. It's only a little bit of hyperbole to say that if you won the Nobel Peace Prize and are in prison in Wisconsin, there is nothing the Department of Corrections can do to let you out 1 day early. So that presents a kind of hopeless situation, which is one of the main concerns that we confront in terms of the long horizon of prison ministry.
I would think that would make you more important than you, John, because John, they're going to be passing on from you in 6 months, 3 months. Jerry's going to be there for their lifetime.
Well, there is that difference, but the things that you face in jail are the shock for some of suddenly being separated from all of who you know and who you prefer to be with. And in some cases they do have support and family that's in the area, in some cases not. But the point is that we're there to meet them in the moment and in that particular situation.
Right.
The shortest way we describe the ministry in the jail is a ministry of presence. As soon as you enter the jail, you're cut off from everything that you knew, in many ways.
Sure.
They're allowed visits, from family or friends, or certainly attorneys come, but there you sit, and now you're contemplating what's going to happen in terms of if they get convicted.
Is there a common theme to what happens the first time you meet someone this is their first experience behind bars, and what you hear?
Is there something in common with
every person you minister to who's never been in jail before? Now they're behind bars. Is there something that comes up in that first conversation?
That's difficult to say. Really, what I'd like to emphasize is that what I see in common with everyone, virtually everyone that gets into the criminal justice system, is unresolved grief. I mean, that unites the people that are in prison and the people that are in jails. There's a common ground that is shared by this population. So much abuse, so much violence, so much loss.
This does not relate to their being arrested. This is just who they are.
Well, this is just part of the background,
right?
That the people have.
So they could have used your ministry before they were arrested.
Well, for sure. If you were 5 years old and you saw your mother commit suicide, you're going to need some help discovering how to value your own life. If you have experienced these losses in life, people shot that so many people incarcerated never were able to talk to someone about these losses and about these wounds.
Wow.
Yeah, this stuff just sits down under the table.
And I take it that has a lot to do with why they're in trouble.
Sure. Unresolved grief pops up in life for many in crime and or addiction. And that's very common.
Makes a lot of sense.
Very common.
Is that, Jerry, your experience?
Absolutely. In terms of the underlying grief is exactly, I think, the right word. And with people who are incarcerated for a long time, that grief continues to grow, because if you go to prison when you're 19 years old and you have a 40-year sentence with no hope of early release, most of the people that were important in your life, your grandparents, very likely your parents, maybe some of your siblings, are going to be dead by the time you get out of prison.
Okay, let me just say something kind of nasty. There's some people listening who are going to say, well, too bad, buddy. You did a bad thing, and this is the price you pay.
That is perfectly understandable, but in many ways probably short-sighted, because most of these people, even someone who's in jail or prison for 40 years, is going to get out. And the question is, do we want our communities to be safer when these people get out of prison? And if we do, treating them humanely while they're in prison, in the long run, makes us safer.
Do you share with John this feeling that these are particularly emotionally wounded people who are kind of set up for crime? It gives you compassion for them?
Well, Dick, I think John and I would both defer to your experience, your therapeutic experience. I suspect that many people are walking around with these kinds of unresolved issues. I think when we see them in the criminal justice system, in some ways they're revealed in ways that offer for the two of us as pastors opportunities for pastoral care.
I would like to hear if there is any commonality. What are the more typical or frequent issues and conversations that come to mind in jail or prison? Is there any pattern?
Certainly, the struggle with addiction is by and large, it's the largest contributor to the population that's in jail, for sure.
Why is that? Why is it? What's the link between addiction and jail?
Easily 80% of the reason why people are ending up in jail is related to addiction.
I assume I know nothing here. What's addiction got to do with why you do a crime?
If you've got a heroin habit at $100 a day,
okay,
what there job are you going to be able to hold down,
right,
and how are you going to be able to fund that habit?
Okay.
So if there was greater emphasis, particularly in this state of Wisconsin, on treatment instead of prison, we would do much more effective work with these folks.
Okay, well, now that's certainly a policy issue. I want to know what's going on, if you will share it with us. As you talk to these people, are they saying, I'm addicted, I need help, why couldn't I get help? Is that what they're talking about?
Sure. Some are ready to reach out and address their issues in addiction. Again, what has led to that use of an addictive substance so often has been the grief. I mean,
so it's self-medicating.
Yeah, and the other aspect that needs to be mentioned here is that a quarter to a third of those 900 in our Dane County Jail here in Madison, Wisconsin, a quarter to a third are seriously mentally ill. Namely, they need medication to modify their symptoms.
When you say mentally ill, do you mean schizophrenic or do you mean depressed?
All of the above, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So when you've got mental illness and addiction crossing over, and it just it further complicates the legal issues.
Okay. I guess what I was hoping we could do is hear the conversations through you. What is it the inmates and prisoners want to talk about?
I think, to follow up on what John said, by the time I see them in prison, and maybe a helpful metaphor for the relationship between what John does and what I do, is John sees people at their most destabilized moment. If we were hospital chaplains, John would be in the emergency room, and I would be doing long-term care.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay?
Makes sense.
And so I think the issues that John sees are people saying, I need some help. I'm in real trouble. I need help. By the time they get to me, they are, in a sense, more stabilized. Not better treated, but at least more stabilized. And the questions that I see, the conversations that I have, are more of the why did this happen to me? What they desperately want to tell their stories. They desperately want to be understood. They desperately want to make some sense of their lives. So we've kind of moved beyond John's seeing them when they are at their most desperate to where I see them in a little more stabilized situation where they're trying to understand their lives.
I would think the word meaning would come up. What is the meaning of my life if I'm in prison for 30 years?
It comes up in a little different context, I think, and that is they want to tell their story. They want to figure out their lives, but then they want to try and find some hope in all this, something to anchor themselves while they're doing this endless number of days with no hope. There's nothing. I mean, this is so critical, not only just for Wisconsin, but throughout the country. We have men and women in prison that are in hopeless situations.
How can you give them hope?
Well,
how can you help them get an anchor?
The way we talk about it is to say there may be hope in learning to live your life with integrity, no matter what community you're in, even if that community is a maximum security prison. And if you start living your life with integrity and making decisions with integrity, then you gain a certain sense of self-respect. And if things were ever to change, you would be in a better position to take advantage of that change. And even if things don't change, when you get out, you will be in a better position to live a life of integrity on the outside.
How do you help them in the day-to-day functions in prison, which I assume are pretty robotic? You're just told what to do. I assume integrity involves choice.
Integrity involves choice, and there are lots of choices you can make in prisons. And one of the things we talk about a lot is meditation. That's something we try and teach. And the other thing is empathy. If we can help people recover their empathy, that is a strategy, I think, for dealing with the grief that John was talking about. Empathy is, I believe that empathy is the key.
Why would that make you feel better to be empathetic?
Well, it at least makes you feel less lonely. In that you can recognize the grief in other people's lives.
I see. And
start to reestablish some, what I would consider, healthier human relationships.
Does this ring a bell in jails as well, or is it pretty different?
Oh, for sure. Just this whole sense of connectedness, that's what's gets severed when, in a significant way, when you go to jail.
Yeah.
And so when I talk to people who, this is their 5th DUI, drunk driving, and I ask them, when you were out before, did you reach out, to connect with AA groups, NA groups, church, any support group of any kind? So often I hear, no, I thought I could do it myself. And there lies this sense of what's at root in our human life is this sense of connectedness. How do we connect? And given the dysfunctional history of so many people who are caught up in this system, they haven't had and known a sense of connectedness, and hence when these losses have occurred, there wasn't anyone who would honor and safely hold that space for them to go through that experience.
So they're pretty disconnected people, you say?
Yeah, quite often.
Lonely people.
And when I ask, well, what's going to have to change for you not to come back here?
Mm-hmm.
Quite often they'll say, well, I can't hang around with that group that I used to.
Mm-hmm.
It's this sense of, all right, I'm hanging out with this group, and this is how we've gotten in trouble.
From a different perspective, when I read about a fifth drunk driving incident, I get mad.
Mm-hmm.
You have compassion for this person who gets in their car drunk after having a hit and run when they're busted for a hit and run their fifth time. I get angry. I think throw the book at them.
Yeah.
Help me be compassionate.
Well, to be in this work, you have to have compassion for anybody in any situation, whether it's homicide or child
so you
abuse.
You never feel negatively because of a crime a person's done who's in front of you, and you think, what a heinous act! How could he do such a horrible thing? That SOB.
Well, in as many years as I've been in this kind of work, I've learned how to place it in context. When I'm, speaking to a group of inmates in chapel, for example, I don't look out there and see a thief, a cheat, a liar, someone who abused people. I see human beings who long to live free and healthy lives at some point, at some place in their lives. Mm-hmm. We are all the same, and we can level all kinds of judgment against someone who has done this or that, but again, when you understand where it's coming from, that sense of, everyone has been wounded in life,
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has suffered loss.
And these people more than most.
Well,
I assume.
The difference is they didn't have a safe place to go through it and come out of that.
I see.
Where you and I bet you us three have all had the safety
Mm-hmm.
of counselor or family or friends to
lean
parents. On.
Dick, let me come at your anger question from a little different perspective.
Sure.
Because I spent a lot of years putting people in prison. I was in many ways the representative of that anger that you talk about.
When you're assistant DA.
Yeah, as part of the community.
Yeah.
So I know what you're talking about. And in terms of even victims of crime, we don't ask them to forgive people that have done terrible things to them and to their family. Forgiveness is not something that as a pastor I can ask of someone. That belongs to them. Okay? But I can be present with everyone. And in being present, you recognize the common suffering that people bring to these situations.
The perpetrator as well as the victim.
Perpetrator, the victim, and it's in that suffering where, as a Christian, I think Jesus wants me to be, is in the middle of that suffering, being present in the suffering of everyone.
Let me play devil's advocate one more time, because people are thinking these things. Don't you ever see evil in the perpetrator?
That's not what I see directly. No.
Never.
Certainly, evil happens. The darkness, the forces within our world certainly have their influence. But again, it's a sense of what is the real person.
So you always see the pain and the abuse or whatever is in this person's life. You don't ever look at a person and have that sense of, this is an awful person.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
I guess I tend to see suffering, but there is a place where I do see evil. Okay? And this was not your question.
Okay.
But this is my answer.
Okay.
Okay? I see evil in policies that create circumstances of hopelessness. And I see that as a theological evil. Evil as a theological term. When you create a system that deprives people of hope, that says, as you are now, when you're 19, you will always be, that denies the possibility of change. And the possibility of change is fundamental to every single faith tradition that I know of. And so for a policy to say, you will not change, is theologically evil.
Yeah. So it's you do your time with no possibility of parole.
You do your time. You will
mandatory sentencing.
You cannot change. We are, as public policy, we are denying the possibility of change
through mandatory sentencing.
Through mandatory sentencing, and that's evil by any faith definition.
I agree.
The people you see, are they sorry? Do they express remorse very often for what they did to you?
Yeah, they do. Again, there's plenty who don't. I'm confident of that. I mean, I'm one chaplain amongst 700 men, and so the number that I can see in a given week or day, it's a limited number. So, but the ones I see are the ones who reach out to me, and they say they want to talk. They want to. So for every 5 I see, there's 50 that I don't. So
you've got a select sample.
Yeah. Sorry, I think is a process. Everybody is sorry they got caught.
Sure.
But you have, and that's part of my pastoral practice and part of our efforts at Restorative Justice, is to move people to recognize, to move beyond sorry to contrition. And contrition means recognizing all the harm you caused by your action.
What does that do for the perpetrator?
Well, what it does is allows them to come to terms with the full impact of the harm they caused. And in doing that, to perhaps gain some insight and empathy. That if you just say, for example, I was just selling drugs, I was just selling heroin, people wanted to buy it, I had no victims. To move beyond that and to say, wait a minute, I destroyed my neighborhood, I brought violence into my neighborhood. Young kids were killed because of drive-by shootings in relation to drug wars in my neighborhood. I'm responsible for that.
This I can see making for a better citizen, a better person.
Right.
But what's the motive of the person doing it?
The motive is, again, not wanting to be stuck.
Okay.
Not wanting to be stuck.
Okay. In your work, if you were to have a list of what your goals are, if you say this was a good week for me in what I want to do, what would be the achievements in your work?
Well, when you're as a minister, you're dealing with invisible things like listening and compassion and the potential of forgiveness, and so the good, successful weeks are the ones where I was able to meet someone and reach them at the level of the heart that I know exists, and beats strong within every person, but has got lots of hurt walled up so that doesn't come out or doesn't get known or identified.
So this kind of fits your theme you're talking about, of their disconnectedness and not seeing
Yeah.
they're connected. You're helping them begin their connection.
Yeah. Another satisfaction is in creating. We created a literacy tutor program in our jail where volunteers come in to tutor. I've met guys who, in young 20s, who the guy said, "Yeah, I sold drugs to support my 3 kids," but then in a little more hushed tone, he said to me, "But I can only read at the 3rd grade reading level." And when I found out that in Wisconsin, our Department of Corrections watches the 2nd and 3rd grade reading levels of the students in our state, that can be a helpful determination in terms of how many prison beds we will need.
Yes.
I got angry. And I said, we are going to have literacy tutors come into this jail. And even though we can only work with them for 3 months or 6 months, again, here comes this piece on hope. If we can alter that sense of I was seen, I was heard, I was helped, and they catch a hold of their desire and ability to learn, that person can either follow that up either in prison perhaps, or if they, in the case of jail, many people come back right out to the community after doing 6 months or 8 months or something. But
Jerry, would you like to take a shot at this question of what's a good day or week for you?
A good week for me is half my week I'd spend inside the walls with the men and women who are there. The other half I'd spend at the Capitol working for prison reform. And on many weeks, the people I meet in prison are much more compassionate than the people I meet in the Capitol.
Wow. Well, gentlemen, I'm sure we could talk for a long time about this, but you've given us certainly a flavor of what you're doing. I thank you very much for joining us, and I hope you listening will join us on the next edition of Insights.